and good evening to each of you as we come to another End Times update. It's good to be back here in the home office, and apologies again to those of you who were hoping to hear something last Thursday night. Hope you got the email. Those of you that didn't, you can be on the mailing list. Feel free to just give me an email here at davidcarylifecoach@gmail.com, and we'll make sure that you're on the email list in case that happens again, where you can at least see the latest update with some pictures of what's going on. But it's good to be back tonight. This is rather an interesting topic. I know many of you will be watching after the fact, and I really hope many of you can who might not otherwise. But this tonight might be one of the more interesting and pertinent to those of us who are very aware of some things that are taking place here in the end times, and we'll get to that in a bit. But first, I want to just let you know this is an update based on the prophecies of the Bible. We have recent Bible studies gone down through. At this moment, we have 21 prophecies. We've numbered them. There are more, many more, and we will hope to add some in time. But for now, this is probably the most concise we can make it, to have 21 and then be matching up current events as they are fulfilling the prophecies. Because many people, and you may be one of them, like I once was, don't realize that there's something very unusual happening in the course of human history right now. It took me a long time to see it, and it may take some of you long as well. But it is a time when there are many things happening kind of all at the same time. Some words are being used out there like confluence, which I didn't even know the meaning was of that for a long time. Congruence. There's several things here where the idea is that there are many things happening at the same time that are fulfilling the prophecies of Jesus especially, but others of the both the New and the Old Testament. And that's what we're trying to do, is kind of keep an eye on that. And for people who are interested or are wondering, many people are in that wondering stage, like, man, there has to be something going on here. So that's the whole idea of the End Times update, is to keep track of that. We'll go ahead and get into some of these prophecies being fulfilled in a few moments. I want to give a little feedback first off. And we've had a couple that are interesting here. This is a typical and a good question. How long is end time supposed to last? James says. Seems like every generation declares it is in the end times. I guess eventually some generation will be correct. And then might have been another time. No, James, I know one written in the book of Revelation, speaking of end times, in the Bible, that you won't survive. Kind of interesting thought. And D, someone said, got a feeling this one will be the one. So a lot of people are feeling that there's something going on here that is unique and kind of unusual for this time. I want to give a little of the feedback because something happened this week that was very special for my wife and I. We had the privilege to go to a funeral on Sunday afternoon, and it was of a very special. It was a funeral for a very special friend, but there were others there, and many of you, and I don't see her on here tonight, but there's a friend I've had for years, actually from way back when I was high school, named Donna. And she is married to a fellow named Roger, who they came down from Indiana to this funeral, and it was my first chance to meet Roger. Very, very special privilege there. We had a good visit, and they have been in part of this group here now for a couple of years, I think, and been very encouraging. And it's just very special to be able to meet friends like that. I hadn't seen Don, I don't think, for 40 some years. So this was unusual, and it was special. to be. In fact, it was at, and I'll go ahead here, it was at the funeral. On this picture, it was the lady at the far left. June was a friend of our family for many, many years. She was about 102, I believe, almost 103 when she passed away. I had the privilege back in 2011, I believe, 2012, to interview June here on your left and Rhoda in the middle, because there was an amazing story about Rhoda in the middle, and June was a witness to it all. It was a very special time, very special opportunity. And thanks, Donna. I see you're commenting there. It was special. But this was a special event. This is a favorite story of mine in my life. It's a miracle. Many, many people, and I've had a good number of folks who touch base with me here since I reposted this on YouTube, on the Cary Life Coaching, I guess it's called a channel on YouTube, and you're welcome to go there and find other interesting stories. But this one was very special, and I guess I bring this up here because I want to encourage you to recognize when God is doing things and God is working. This was so obvious, so blatant. I was a small boy, and I saw her when she was dying. In fact, the doctor that delivered me had told my parents she was dying of cancer, and actually she passed a couple of his death dates. And then, interestingly, she was healed in a remarkable way, and I saw her after her healing, and it left such a great impression. And I wish other people could see things like that. It does quicken someone's faith. But the good news is, whether someone is healed physically like this in a dramatic fashion or not, faith in God brings good results, and it brings his helps us through tough times that he doesn't choose to change for us. So that's the good word that came out of that. I share that in part because this is a feedback section here, and this was the opportunity at this funeral for June to the friend of Rhoda's to meet up with Donna and Roger, and just to get to talk to them and to feel the encouragement and the camaraderie that we all share. We're looking forward to getting together again with them. Let's go into some prophecies for those, again, who are not familiar with what we're doing. We've just taken and itemized and listed prophecies as they're here in the scriptures, especially Matthew 24. I'm not going to read all down through them tonight. There are many here that you may want to look at in time, and maybe even stop your video if this is new to you. Stop your whatever your player is, and look at these, or just go to the book of Matthew chapter 24 in the New Testament of the Holy Bible, and you will find that there are a few we've added. Here's one that I am reminded of now so often, because there are lots of scoffers, lots of doubters, people who doubt and even ridicule Christ's second coming, and Peter said that would be a sign of the end times, interestingly enough. But what I want to do is I want to pick out here in a minute and talk about 3 or 4 very specifically. I did, and I'm just going to mention briefly that the end times prophecies require global and talk about global events happening in a large scale on a regular basis. And we've talked here about physical distress, persecution, apostasy, evangelism, translation, communications, audiovisual, a financial system, which we're going to talk about tonight, the ID system we're going to talk about tonight, government, and a third temple would have to be built. So these are all things that, and I have people going, really? These things are happening? And yes, really, they are, in a rather remarkable way. We'll go to what we've listed as our third prophecy. There will be wars and rumors of wars. I have to keep talking about this because this is intensifying in a rather unusual way, in a way that it's not unusual that we've had wars. Not unusual there have been rumors of wars, that's for sure. What is unusual are two things. One, the large-scale ramifications of what are happening right now globally, and also what social media and communication has done to make these so prevalent. The talk of war. Almost anybody you talk to, whether it's been on a media through the normal communications of main broadcasters, or whether it's been through social media or on the phone, your cell phone, with news sources, you're hearing of this. And most everybody, there was a time many people wouldn't hear of things till days after the fact. In fact, there'd be many people who'd never hear of it at all, back even 300-400 years ago. If you lived in England, you wouldn't hear of a lot of things happening in other countries of the world. But now it's instantaneous, and it's very much felt everywhere. Here's China, Russia, and Iran, as we think and talk together tonight, who are doing naval exercises in the Gulf of Oman. Here is North Korea, that has sent a couple of missile launches. They do not like the United States and South Korea doing military exercises. And this here, they sent off a couple of missiles, again, coinciding with military exercises we are doing. But if you go into this article here by Al Jazeera, news source, they are telling people that they have full intent to be able to annihilate the enemy, using some strong words there. And this is especially strong. In fact, there's two of the headlines tonight we'll talk about that have to do with the main state stations, TV stations, broadcasting companies in each of two countries. One is in North Korea, and it's on this particular it's a news source that they are talking about. They're with no qualms at all talking about annihilating the United States, amongst the, just picture if that was coming across on your news, mine as a citizen of the United States, if somebody was constantly putting out there that we are making plans and being prepared to destroy another country. That's what they're doing, and I don't know how you can say anything much more clear in terms of a rumor of war. NATO has warned Putin is not bluffing over nuclear threats as war plans are collapsing around him. And this is intensifying, picking up some steam here, interesting way. There are a lot of articles out there showing that there are some problems, not just with possibly Ukraine having troubles, but there are problems with Russian soldiers not feeling good about what's going on. And it's I don't know, there's some things here that make me think that this can't go on forever like this, or as it's been. So we will probably see if some things happening before long that are a little bit more involved. Here is this the second station, or should I say it's Russia One channel. It's the main state television, is saying that Russia should unleash nuclear torpedo on the U.S. So we have at least two countries right now, North Korea and Russia, who are blatantly in their news stations, and people go, "Oh, but that's just their state. That's just their news." Like, listen, their news is not like our news. Their news is controlled by their state. You probably know that by now. So these are not just commentators or opinionated people who are giving their opinions. It comes across sometimes that way, but these are people who, no doubt, if they were not to be saying these things, they would not be saying these things. And if they are to say these things, they are going to be saying these things. So, I mean, there's a psychology going on here that has the different countries not only developing an animosity, big countries, nuclear powers developing an animosity toward the United States, but they are amongst the citizens developing a certain thought of doing damage, and in this case, nuclear torpedo. Iran says gearing up to attack Britain as evidence of regime's Russia support mounts. So Iran's coming into the picture, and we went back to that first picture we showed. We've got Iran, Russia, and China doing some wartime practices of their own. kind of interesting, isn't it, that Russia is in a war, but they're also working with China and Iran, preparing for other wars. Very interesting here, what's going on. Let's go to prophecy 6. There'd be earthquakes, and we've explained this in the past, that word seismos. It's waves, not just of the ground as in an earthquake, but it's waves. It's generally translated in scriptures in different ways, but it's about ground waves, water waves, air waves, you name it. And here's an interesting article again. Hundreds of earthquakes detected. Alaska volcano that has been dormant since 1914. So again, some would say, see there. So they've been going on for hundreds of years. That's true. But what is interesting, and those of you who are following this, you're seeing lots of this where there are earthquakes and earthquake swarms, they call them. A new phrase for me. But a very interesting situation going there. And the Ring of Fire is still going strong here. It circles kind of around up through Alaska, but also down along the east side of Asia and down the west side of the United States and down into New Zealand. Here they're having a strong quake in the past week. The Kermadec Islands, a little ways away from there. Papua New Guinea had a 6.3 earthquake. A lot of times what they track when they talk about the intensity of earthquakes is not just the numbers, these swarms that are taking place around the volcanoes. One recently was talking of a number of 2,200, I believe, earthquakes, smaller scale, on Richter scale, but right there in the volcanic areas. But what a lot of times they keep track of are what's over 6.0, that's bigger. And so every time I hear of one that's bigger than 6.0, I'm thinking that is pretty interesting and pretty much an indicator that things are happening in an interesting way. And I'm going to try to do, there's a chart that's out that is using our U.S. Geological Service's own data, and it is showing how that these 6.0s are becoming more and more prominent and more recognized. So it's of interest as we who are thinking along these lines study things here in these end times. Here's something I thought was actually comical, sort of, but of interest, and I want to hear more about it. This is CNN. I'm assuming this is legitimate, very legitimate. Just recently talking about a blob twice the width of the U.S. is heading towards Florida's coast. Have any of the rest of you heard about this? I didn't know what category to put it in. It sounds like waves are bringing it in for sure. I don't know if you'd call it a wave, but it's a seaweed blob. And I'm very fascinated by that. I've seen some other pictures. I did do a little research, and I've seen pictures of seaweed that is washed ashore in certain places from this blob, and it's quite interesting to see. It's a new for me in my watching of things going on here in the world, and it's probably worth talking about. I'm not sure exactly what to think about it, but it fits in the seismos when we talk about this. So that's kind of where we're coming from this evening. Let's go to what I like to keep mentioning. I just have to, for this people who this is their first time, and I do get a lot of response on this. I have to remind people that the one sign that Jesus said it would happen, we do not talk about hours or days that Jesus would return. It makes it plain that only God the Father, back when Jesus was in the man on earth on talking, said he knew that. For sure, we don't know that. But the last sign Jesus said before the end would come, when things really got intense, is that the gospel would be preached to all peoples. And interestingly, in my wife's new study Bible, chronological study Bible, inside the front cover, it says Tyndale House and Wycliffe Bible translators are working together to have the Bible in all languages 2025, or at least some form of it. The gospel, no doubt. A lot of times they start with the book of John, and when they're translating them. So here is this is 2 years away, and never ever before in the history of mankind has this happened. So again, another one of these things that's very new to all of us who are looking on, watching, and waiting for the return of our Lord. Let's go to now this topic I want to talk about. Back in our study, oh man, it probably was 2 years ago, my guess. I ran across this chart right here that digital identity. It's a chart by the World Economic Forum. I was just still getting familiar with the World Economic Forum, and I didn't realize the amazing power they have and how they're working with the United Nations and the big investment companies, BlackRock, Vanguard, some of those that right now are controlling so much of what's happening in our world. But I was intrigued by this chart, digital identity, and I didn't really know what it meant. And I have been for a good while trying to make the connection between digital identity and the end global economic system that John in Book of Revelation talks about pretty extensively, and makes it very clear that what he saw was that in existence. We call it the mark of the beast, many things you refer to it as. But to go from here to that, I was having a bit of trouble connecting the dots, and it wasn't like I felt like I had to. There's so many things in prophecy that they kind of unfold, and those of us human beings who are looking on and watching and trying to match up current events with prophecies, we don't expect to understand everything, but I think we're pretty curious, and that's where I've been. Well, somebody, and I don't know who, maybe one of you can tell me it was me. I've tried to find who it was that gave me this link to put me in touch with a certain resource. I'm very interested. There's a fella, and I'm going to show you a little more about him here just in a minute. There's a fella that is named Amon. Oh, I'll have to go to it here after all, I think. Jabi, and I'm not sure I say it right. But he is not a Christian. It says that himself, not a believer, and he's probably religious other ways, but he has Christian friends, and he respects them, obviously. But he worked in the Silicon Valley for a number of years in developing cameras. That was his specialty and what his focus was on. These are all things he has said. And whoever showed me and introduced me to him, he is now, and you can go on YouTube and you can see him on a number of places, Amon Jabi. Here he's on zmedia.com. And what he does is he has a presentation, and he shows it on quite a few different podcasters and YouTube sites. It's pretty much the same. Whoever the podcaster is, they'll interrupt and raise good points and get the discussion going along certain lines. But here's Maria Z. She does a nice job of talking to him, and maybe one of the more popular ways of showing us what's coming down the pike. He acts like he has a world of information. He comes across as he's very versed and very comfortable, very knowledgeable. And I found him extremely interested in what I was referring to here as the digital identity. Because when I first saw this chart, what would come to my mind is the day truly coming before long that we will need to have an identity before we benefit from healthcare or financial services or food, access to food, travel, e-commerce, using social platforms and communication, government involvements, telecommunications, even, and then into this concept of smart cities, which I've heard about. Maybe you have too, but it appears by this that there has to be a digital identity, but a digital service in motion. And what Iman does is he shows us that it is in motion in a rather interesting way. And he talks about how that your identity, which is already being developed, is your facial identity. And he makes a rather startling point at one time. He says, for those of you who think this could be coming down the pike, or you're not sure, or you doubt it, or it sounds like conspiracy theory, he said, it's already happening. Sorry, you're too late. If you don't think it's here, it's here. And I was reminded that recently when my wife and I left the country, on the way out of the country, as we were boarding the plane in Dallas, Texas, leaving to go to Mexico, as we walked past to show the ticket to get on the plane, the person said before I got to the ticket counter, "Thank you, Mr. Cary." And I'm like, okay, here's the ticket. And it realized, and the person, they were telling everybody, well, your face is all we need. It pulls things up. And sure enough, as I walked past it and looked back, there was my face and information that's all they needed for me to get on the plane. That was rather interesting. Then it wasn't that trip, but another one coming back into the country, coming through customs. It was so interesting to me that as I pulled my passport out and started to put it up on the desk of the customs officer's desk, he again said, "Thank you, Mr. Cary." And I was now kind of prepared for it, but I was intrigued, and he could tell I was intrigued, and he turned the screen toward me and he said, "Don't need to even look at your passport. It's all right here." He didn't stamp it, which was interesting to me. Didn't do anything with the passport. He just did something online, and there it was. So those two things came to my mind when I heard about this particular Aman Jabi and what he was talking, and how he is saying that the digital ID that is already in place is um, facial recognition based, and that it already is active. It's at work even now. So think with me for a minute. When you think about a facial recognition and how that what is coming down, Iman Jabi says that it's not just that this is an amazing system of IDs. It's that in time, for you and me to access the things we want to access, it will depend on our facial recognition, which will tie in with certain he didn't call it the social credit score like we hear of in China, but he said that there will be a system in place that scores how much you are. For a simple thing, and this is a good example, if you're vaccinated, it will keep track of that. And many of you, by the way, have heard me talk, and I wish I had a copy of it right here. But there is a very fascinating patent. You can find it online very easily. The Bill Gates actually got in 2020. And it's a very interesting patent that is tying together. This is not conspiracy. You can go online right now, check on patents, and if I tell you the number of it, you'll pull it right up. Actually, it's very, very simple to see, but it's tying together the cyber financial system with the bio system, the body, the health. And I really feel from other things I've heard now, Bill Gates say in his talk as he seeks world solutions and to help the masses to keep disease at a minimum. It's very simple in that he says that the time is coming when every human being will be tracked, is a word that is used, and that they'll be able to see who's been vaccinated, who is not, who is safe, who is not. They'll even be able to in time determine who is sick, who is not, by different types of sensors and cameras in the public, which I find fascinating. But what you're going to find fascinating too is that the number of that patent is 2020 06 06 06. Now, that's got to be a coincidence, I guess. And Bill Gates has chuckled at the many people who think that that is already something indicating mark of the beast, which if you don't know the passage in Revelation 13 talking about the mark and this idea of 666, the number of man, again, it's just a very fascinating thing to have a patent. And what are the odds? Some mathematician could tell me, I'm sure, tell us. but it is a fascinating thing. And so here you have this kind of technology. Bill Gates already says we have the technology in the world to already track every human being. And so I don't think it's going to happen this year. I can't see anybody with the technology making it happen 2023. I may be wrong because things are happening pretty fast. But just to hear about this, and I would encourage you to listen at least to Amanjabi. It'll tie things together, I think, in a rather good way, much better than I can in just a few minutes here. I was going to tell you, so digital, and the whole thing here is it's a matter of digital. Just in the last week or so, long-awaited Fed digital payment system to launch in July. So you heard us talking here. There were 9 banks being tested with using digital dollars and whatnot here in the United States. And now here we are, the next step being taken in July. There's going to be a Fed digital payment system, which I think is quite fascinating, which and everything that Manjabi talks about, I'm seeing. Here's some out of our local Daily Memphian. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, USA. And here is the future, the leader of the MLG&W, our light gas, Memphis Light Gas Water Company, who is talking about the need to be prepared because the future is arriving very quickly. And if you read the article, it doesn't go into a lot of detail, but it definitely paints a picture that times are changing, and due to whether it's the climate and the storms that are causing so many blackouts. This is the first time in this last few months that our city has had to have some power rationing, and this has been quite an interesting time. And I think many of you know that it was 8 years ago that I first started even studying these things because I accidentally, a customer of mine, I overheard talking about Memphis. She had Memphis Light Gas and Water as one of her customers, and she was trying to help them with their cybersecurity because the grid here and their computers were being hacked on a regular basis. And that has been quite an interesting story all of its own. But tonight, just telling again, here is Amanjabi talking about these things that are going to happen, and here is a local power company that is preparing for much more bigger and more powered days here in our own city. Another thing that I found so fascinating, Amanjabi says that even now, someone asked him on one of these podcasts, they said, so is everything we're saying and doing right here on the phone or watching YouTube or talking, is this all being recorded, all of it? And he said, I don't think all of it's being recorded, but he said it is constantly picking up on keywords, and it is sending that data to the cloud. In fact, I'm going to mention real briefly, because this is fascinating for those of you who are a little bit into science, and I'll try to keep it simple. He says there are 5 pillars of the digital transformation that's taking place. And he said data is obviously one, and it's what we have with our phones, and that you have cameras on the front and back. And maybe some of you know this, but I'm not sure. I know most of you now, if we chat about something like this, you're impressed that it can pick up on things you say, and moments later there's an advertisement on your phone. Even when your phone is off, we're being told that words you say and certain things, the camera still works. And it's hard for me to believe, but that's what they say. And that's the data, pillar number 1, that is required for this whole system to work. And within just a year or two, we're being told there'll be 20 billion cameras, counting our cell phones, 20 billion cameras in our phones, on the cars, in our homes, in our refrigerators, that will be taking in data to be processed. And then he said it goes to the cloud, which I used to think clouds are white, fluffy, pretty things, but this is a data reserve. It's something that stores huge amounts, obviously. And then he said artificial intelligence, that is becoming such a big topic and so prevalent, it takes that data and at least intelligence does, and it sorts and categorizes, and it knows how to put what's meaningful where and flag what's needed and whatnot. So that's pillar number 3. And then it sends it to your ledger, your personal ledger, which is blockchain technology. And many of us have learned about that because of this right now, what's going on with the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and some of these other cryptocurrencies out there. It actually, blockchain technology actually started to accommodate that. And instead of having a centralized bank per se that was keeping track of your dollars and what happened with your dollars, it would give a personal ledger that you're your own banking institution yourself, and it's your ledger. And that's blockchain technology. That's the 4th pillar. And then the final one is the crypto security, and it's that system that truly is for the well-being of all people, tracking who does what and where they spend their money and what they say, and it's trying to make sure that the world community is safe with you in it. So those are the 5 pillars, and very fascinating topic. And don't you see, and by the way, Bill Gates says the technology is there, and we're seeing all these things that are falling in place pretty rapidly. Don't you see now an easy way to connect the dots between today and what could happen in time, to have it very easy to have some kind of a mark, something required that if you're going to be a part of that world system, you have to do something, show something, indicate that you're aligned with them. It's not hard to see. And this fella, not even a believer, is telling us of the technology that is there and being implemented as he comes out of Silicon Valley. He's moved from California to Montana, interestingly, and you hear his story some on some of these podcasts. So I share that tonight, again, just because I think it's some really good information. It's not necessarily a news headline, but boy, does it ever tell the story here of what's happening. And here is, for those of you wondering, what does U.S. intel agencies talking about focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion have to do? That 5th pillar, remember the 5 pillars: data, cloud, artificial intelligence was the 4th one, blockchain, handling all your information about you on your own ledger, and then crypto security. This last bit right here, it so intrigues me that our intelligence chief in the past week is saying that our intelligence agencies need to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are very much societal, behavioral, attitudinal, non-monetary, non-physical necessarily, unless somebody makes it violent, but they're on things that have to do with you and me and our approach to others in our life, of living, of loving others and caring about people. And those words all mean something. You're going to hear more and more and more about those. So on your ledger, you're going to have, no doubt, words that are recorded and saved. And in fact, Iman Jabi says right now, you already have a score. By the way, I didn't know this, but he pointed out, and my wife verified it with a recent airline ticket. Right now, your carbon footprint is being tracked. Everything's being deduced right now as we live. It may not have all the cameras on us and all the information and data that it wants, but it's there. It's happening. If you think it's coming, you're too late. It's happening. Now, for many people, that's very unnerving. And even for me, it's concerning, I have to admit. But I can tell you that for those of us and for those of you who will choose to have faith in God, there is a real hope and a real comfort and a real peace, knowing that with all of this that's going on, there is still a God that is in control, and he is able to do exactly what he says he will do. In fact, there's nothing that's going to happen that doesn't fit into his plan. There's a great big picture that's taken place. It's way bigger than what we've talked about right here. by the way, you might be interested to know that Jabi here, Elon Jabi, has nicknamed these 5 pillars in the digital transformation. He's been calling it the beast. And you know where he got that? From his Christian friends who told him, everything you're describing, Iman, is out of the book of Revelation. Now, again, he's not a believer, but he, I guess, figured that there's no better word than just to describe it as something, and he calls it the beast. So what I find fascinating is that there's something and wonderful and encouraging. There's not just the beast in place, but there is something and someone bigger that has prophesied everything from hundreds of years ago. There are no surprises. You and I need not to get too upset about anything here if we are believers, because what we're seeing should not be so surprising, really, right? If you've studied it at all, like many of you have, it should not be that surprising. So having said that, I want to go to a bit more encouragement before I wrap up, and that is, some of you know that we just buried my wife's sister a week ago today up in St. Louis, and I thank you again, those of you that sent prayers and cards and words of encouragement, emails, actually, some of you. This was Carolyn, who passed away, and what a wonderful sister-in-law she was to me, wonderful sister to my wife, to her other sister, Marie, to her husband, Mark. And it was very comforting for us at the funeral. And it's going to be the same kind of comfort no matter what happens to any of us in life. That when you have faith and when you are at peace with God, you have peace with yourself and your life and the circumstances. And it was so encouraging as I had a chance to speak at the funeral, to talk about what I had known Carolyn to have done with her faith. And she had no doubt. One day as we were at her bedside, a couple weeks before she died, I was saying a prayer and thanking God for forgiveness of sins and peace in our heart, and how that he could be a help to us in the worst of life circumstances, even when we're dying. And I happened to open my eyes and look at Carolyn, who was locked in on my eyes. And when she saw that I saw her, though she hadn't been talking a lot, but when she saw me, she very specifically nodded her head. Yes, like going on record. My faith's there, and yes, he is here and helping. So that was encouraging. And the scripture that I gave here, and I'll share it in closing, is out of 1 Corinthians, where this thought is part of what we live by. But here Paul told the Corinthian church, listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, meaning never to perish again, and we will be changed. And then I like what he says a little further down. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? And you see faith in the good help of the Lord, and what happens when we look to him and trust in him. It does take the sting out of it, doesn't it? And to have the hope of there's a great day coming. There's a great day coming. And as it concludes here, thanks be to God, he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. So I leave on those words. I hope this has been helpful and meaningful. Going a few minutes past what I like to have as my goal of 40 minutes, but hope it's meaningful, and we'll hope that you all have a great week ahead. We'll look forward to catching up and talking more, and continuing to support and encourage. Thank you for the feedback that you all give time to time. It really does me good. All right. God bless you, each one. Take care.